Right now, at this very moment, something is shifting inside the brain of every person who has passed their 75th birthday. And the overwhelming majority of them have absolutely no idea it is happening. This is not a slow, distant process reserved for the very old or the very sick. This is a biological reality that begins accelerating the day you cross that threshold, and it operates in total silence. The frightening part about this is not what you feel, it is what you do not feel. There are no headaches, no dizziness, no obvious warning signs flashing across your daily life. Your brain, the 3-pound organ that holds every memory, every skill, every piece of who you are, is undergoing 5 specific, measurable changes right now, and most of them produce 0 symptoms until the damage has compounded for months or even years. The good news is that you are watching this today, and today is exactly when this information can still make a real, meaningful, life-altering difference. By the time we reach the end of this video, you will understand all 5 of these changes, why they happen, and, most importantly, the specific steps that science says can slow them down and, in some cases, partially reverse them. And the longer you go without understanding what is happening inside your skull after 75, the more serious this picture becomes. Let me walk you through the first change, because it is already underway right now, even as you sit here listening. Your brain is shrinking. Not metaphorically, not as a figure of speech, physically, measurably shrinking. After the age of 60, the human brain loses roughly 0.5% of its total volume every single year. But research published through the National Institute on Aging shows that after 75, that rate accelerates. In some individuals, it doubles. Picture your brain right now, not as a fixed, permanent mass, but as a living, breathing organ wrapped in layers of tissue, threaded with billions of connections, and cushioned by fluid. What is happening after 75 is that the gray matter, the outer layer responsible for processing thought, holding memory, making decisions, begins to thin at a faster pace. The prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain sitting right behind your forehead, the region that governs planning, impulse control, and complex reasoning, that area is especially vulnerable. And here is where your daily life connects directly to this science. Think about what you did this morning. Think about when you woke up, whether you ate breakfast, whether you moved your body in the first 2 hours of the day. Because every single one of those decisions either fed your brain the oxygen and nutrients it needs to maintain its volume, or it did not. At 75, the margin for error narrows dramatically. A sedentary morning is no longer just a lazy morning. It is a morning where blood flow to your brain dropped, where glucose metabolism slowed, and where the very tissue you depend on for clear thinking received less support than it needed. The second change happening inside your brain at 75 is closely related, and it is one that most people have never heard a doctor explain clearly. Your white matter, the deep inner wiring that connects different brain regions to each other, is developing tiny lesions. These are called white matter hyperintensities, and they show up on MRI scans as small bright spots scattered throughout the brain's interior. They are remarkably common after 75, and while a few of them may be harmless, as they accumulate, they begin to disrupt the speed at which your brain sends signals from one region to another. This is why you might notice that recalling a word takes a half-second longer than it used to, or why a decision that once felt automatic now requires a moment of pause. It is not dementia, it is not Alzheimer's, it is your wiring fraying at the connection points. But there is still one more layer to this, and it is the one that changes everything about how urgently you need to respond. What happens next, if nothing changes, is where the stakes climb to a level that demands your full attention. The third change occurring in your brain at 75 involves your neurotransmitters, and this one operates so quietly that even the most health-conscious individuals miss it entirely. Dopamine, the chemical messenger responsible for motivation, reward, pleasure, and the drive to get up and do something meaningful with your day, declines by approximately 10% per decade starting in your 30s. By the time you reach 75, your brain may be operating with 30 to 40% less dopamine than it had during your peak years. Picture what this looks like inside your head right now. Deep in the center of your brain, there are clusters of neurons called the substantia nigra and the ventral tegmental area. These are your dopamine factories. And at 75, these factories are running with fewer workers, less raw material, and slower production lines. The result is not dramatic. It is subtle. It is that quiet afternoon feeling where you think about going for a walk and then decide not to. It is the evening when you consider calling a friend but somehow never pick up the phone. It is the slow, almost imperceptible retreat from engagement. Not because you are depressed, not because something is clinically wrong, but because the chemical fuel for motivation is running lower than it used to. And this is where timing matters enormously. Think about your evenings this past week. Think about what you did between 6 and 9 at night. Did you engage in something mentally stimulating? A conversation, a puzzle, a book, a new recipe? Or did you default to passive watching, passive sitting, passive waiting for the day to end? Because every evening spent in passive mode is an evening where your already reduced dopamine system receives no signal to keep producing. The brain reads inactivity as a message. We do not need as much. And it adjusts downward. The fourth change is one that researchers at Harvard Medical School and the National Institutes of Health have been studying with increasing urgency over the past decade. It involves your brain's immune system, a network of cells called microglia, and after 75, these cells begin to behave in ways that work against you. In a younger brain, microglia act as housekeepers. They clean up dead cells, clear out waste proteins, and protect neurons from infection and damage. But in an aging brain, particularly after 75, these same cells can become chronically activated. They shift from protective mode into inflammatory mode. And once that switch flips, they begin releasing inflammatory molecules that damage the very neurons they were designed to protect. This is not the most critical part yet. The next section reveals why all of this accelerates and what the turning point actually looks like. Here is where the hidden mechanism ties everything together. And understanding this single process is worth more than 100 doctor visits where no one thought to mention it. The fifth change happening in your brain the day you turn 75 is a disruption in something called your glymphatic system. Most people have never heard this term, and that is a problem. Because this system may be the single most important discovery in brain aging research in the last 20 years. Your glymphatic system is your brain's waste removal network. It operates primarily while you sleep, specifically during deep, slow-wave sleep. And its job is to flush out toxic proteins that accumulate during your waking hours. One of those proteins is beta amyloid, the same substance that forms the plaques associated with Alzheimer's disease. Another is tau, which tangles inside neurons and disrupts their ability to communicate. Picture what happens inside your skull at 2 o'clock in the morning. If you are in deep sleep, true, restorative, slow-wave sleep, your brain cells actually shrink slightly, creating wider channels between them. Cerebrospinal fluid then rushes through those channels like a cleaning crew moving through an empty building at night, washing away the metabolic debris of the day. It is elegant. It is essential. And after 75, it starts to fail. Research from the University of Rochester and the National Institute on Aging shows that the glymphatic system becomes significantly less efficient with age. The channels narrow. Deep sleep becomes harder to achieve and shorter in duration. And the toxic proteins that should be cleared each night begin to accumulate, layer upon layer, night after night. Think about last night. Think about how you slept. Did you fall asleep easily? Did you stay asleep? Did you wake up feeling genuinely rested? Or did you wake up feeling like your brain was wrapped in gauze? Because the quality of your sleep at 75 is not just about how you feel in the morning. It is about whether your brain successfully completed its nightly detoxification cycle. Every night of poor sleep is a night where beta amyloid and tau were not adequately cleared. And those proteins do not simply disappear on their own. They accumulate, they stick, they build. This is the hidden engine behind so much of what we attribute to normal aging. The fogginess, the forgetfulness, the feeling of mental slowness that creeps in so gradually you barely notice it happening. But here is what changes everything. Here is where the science pivots from warning to genuine, actionable hope. Because your brain at 75 is far more capable of recovery than most people have been led to believe. The turning point begins with a single, powerful truth that the research confirms again and again. Neuroplasticity does not stop at 75. Your brain can still form new connections. It can still strengthen existing pathways. It can still respond, measurably, visibly on imaging scans, to changes in behavior, nutrition, and environment. The decline we just described is not a locked trajectory. It is a tendency, and tendencies can be redirected. Studies published through PubMed and reviewed by researchers at Johns Hopkins Medicine demonstrate that older adults who engage in consistent aerobic exercise show measurable increases in hippocampal volume, the region of the brain most critical for memory formation. Not just slower decline, actual growth at 75. Think about what this means for your morning tomorrow. Think about the difference between waking up and sitting in a chair for 2 hours versus waking up and walking for 20 minutes. That 20-minute walk is not just exercise. It is a direct intervention in your brain's physical structure. It increases blood flow to the hippocampus. It triggers the release of brain-derived neurotrophic factor, a protein that acts like fertilizer for neurons, promoting their growth and survival. It stimulates dopamine production, counteracting the natural decline we discussed earlier. And it improves the quality of your sleep the following night, which in turn supports your glymphatic system's ability to clear toxic waste. One action, one morning decision, 4 cascading benefits across 4 of the 5 changes we have covered. The research from the Mayo Clinic reinforces this with remarkable clarity. Adults over 70 who engage in moderate physical activity at least 5 times per week show significantly slower rates of brain volume loss, better white matter integrity, higher cognitive test scores, and, critically, lower rates of progression to dementia. This is not speculation. This is measured, peer-reviewed, replicated science. And the window for the easiest, most impactful intervention is open right now. Not next year, not after your next appointment. Right now, in the way you structure your very next morning. But exercise is only one piece. What I am about to share next is where the real, sustained protection begins to take shape. And it starts with something you do every single evening. Here's what changes when you start addressing this from multiple angles and how quickly the benefits begin to show. Let us start with sleep, because if your glymphatic system is the key to clearing toxic proteins from your brain, then sleep is the hand that turns that key. The National Institute on Aging recommends that adults over 65 aim for 7 to 8 hours of sleep per night. But the critical factor is not just duration, it is depth. Deep, slow-wave sleep is where the real cleaning happens, and there are specific, evidence-based strategies to increase it. First, your evening routine matters more at 75 than it ever has before. What you do between 7 and 9 at night sets the stage for everything that happens inside your brain between midnight and 4 in the morning. Exposure to bright screens, televisions, tablets, phones, within 2 hours of bedtime suppresses melatonin production and delays the onset of deep sleep. This is not a minor inconvenience. At 75, when your glymphatic efficiency is already reduced, even a 30-minute delay in reaching deep sleep can mean the difference between adequate waste clearance and accumulation. Consider replacing that last hour of screen time with something your brain actually benefits from. A conversation with someone you care about, a chapter of a book, gentle stretching, or even simply sitting in a dimly lit room with quiet music. These are not luxuries. These are neurological interventions dressed in ordinary clothing. Second, your sleep environment needs to be cool. Research consistently shows that a bedroom temperature between 60 and 67 degrees Fahrenheit promotes deeper, more restorative sleep. Your brain's waste clearance system functions optimally when your core body temperature drops slightly during the night, and a warm bedroom actively fights against that process. Third, caffeine. If you are drinking coffee or tea after noon, you may be compromising your deep sleep without realizing it. Caffeine has a half-life of 5 to 6 hours, meaning that a cup of coffee at 2 in the afternoon still has half its stimulant effect at 8 at night. At 75, your body metabolizes caffeine more slowly than it did at 50, which means that afternoon cup may be quietly sabotaging your brain's nightly cleaning cycle. Now, let us talk about nutrition, because your brain is the most metabolically demanding organ in your body. It consumes roughly 20% of your total energy, despite being only 2% of your body weight. And what you eat directly affects every one of the 5 changes we have discussed. But the most decisive moves you can make, the ones that compound over weeks and months, are what we need to talk about next. The sustained changes that offer the deepest protection require consistency, not perfection. And that distinction matters enormously. Let us talk about what you put on your plate, because the research from Harvard Health and the Cleveland Clinic points to specific dietary patterns that directly support brain volume, white matter integrity, neurotransmitter production, microglial regulation, and glymphatic function. The MIND diet, a hybrid of the Mediterranean and DASH diets specifically designed for brain health, has been studied extensively in adults over 65. The results are striking. Adherents show up to a 53% lower risk of developing Alzheimer's disease, and even moderate adherence produces a 35% reduction. This is not a complicated diet. It emphasizes leafy greens, at least 6 servings per week. Berries, at least 2 servings per week. Nuts, whole grains, fish, olive oil. And it minimizes red meat, butter, cheese, pastries, and fried food. Think about your lunch today. Think about whether it included a single leafy green vegetable. Because that one addition, a handful of spinach in a soup, a side salad with your sandwich, is a direct deposit into your brain's structural bank account. The omega-3 fatty acids in fish, particularly DHA, are incorporated directly into neuronal cell membranes, improving their flexibility and their ability to transmit signals. This is especially relevant for the white matter lesions we discussed earlier, because healthier cell membranes mean more resilient wiring. Beyond diet, there is one more intervention that the science supports with extraordinary consistency, and it is one that too many people overlook: social engagement. Researchers at Johns Hopkins and the National Institute on Aging have found that social isolation in adults over 70 is associated with faster brain atrophy, higher levels of neuroinflammation, and accelerated cognitive decline. Conversely, regular, meaningful social interaction, not just being in the same room as others, but genuine conversation, emotional connection, shared laughter, stimulates dopamine production, reduces cortisol levels, and activates multiple brain regions simultaneously. If you are watching this and you recognize yourself in what I have described, if this feels like it was written specifically for your situation, type the word "today" in the comments, because that word means something. It means you are choosing to act now, not next month, not after the next appointment, today. That single word is a commitment to your own brain, and I want to see it below this video. You now know something that most people will spend years, perhaps the rest of their lives, never learning. You understand the 5 specific, science-backed changes that accelerate inside your brain at 75. The volume loss, the white matter lesions, the dopamine decline, the microglial shift toward chronic inflammation, and the breakdown of your glymphatic waste clearance system. And more importantly, you now hold the knowledge to push back against every single one of them. Your brain is not your enemy in this. It has been waiting, genuinely waiting, for exactly this kind of support. Every walk you take, every night of deep sleep you protect, every plate of leafy greens, every meaningful conversation, every evening you choose a book over a screen. These are not small things. They are the language your brain understands. They are the signals that tell your neurons to hold on, to rebuild, to keep firing. This is Dr. Albert Winslow, and I want you to know something that goes beyond the science. I want you to live fully. Not just survive your 70s and 80s, but feel sharp, feel present, feel like yourself inside them. That is not a dream. The research says it is genuinely possible, and it starts with the decisions you make between now and tomorrow morning. Please, pass this video along to someone you love who is over 70. Share it with a friend, a spouse, a sibling, because the information in this video could change the trajectory of someone's brain health starting tonight. And stay close to this channel, because what we cover next is going to be just as important, just as urgent, and just as full of real, practical hope for the years ahead. I will see you in the next one.